All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. So the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame says that voting for Dolly Parton will continue. Dolly Parton does this classy thing, which finally drew attention to the fact that the Hall of Fame has been misguided now for at least a couple of decades, if not longer. And she believes she's not worthy to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because she doesn't fit that particular category, which is spot on and correct. I'm starting to think, this is like the non-binary music Hall of Fame. That's what this is. It's music fluid. Okay, it can change, it can morph into, it's like if you're feeling country one day, that's okay. But if you're feeling rock and roll the next day, or if you're feeling like jazzy or a little R&B the following day, it's okay because music is kind of fluid. And thus that's what this is becoming, even though the title of it is Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, the director of communications for the Hall of Fame says, all of us in the music community have seen Dolly Parton's thoughtful note expressing her feeling that she has not earned the right to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In addition to her incredible talent as an artist, her humility is another reason Dolly is a beloved icon by millions of fans around the world. Okay, from its inception, get this, rock and roll has had deep roots in rhythm and blues and country music. Okay, it is not defined by any one genre, rather a sound that moves youth culture. Let me say that again. It is not defined by any one genre, rather a sound that moves youth culture. What does that even mean? First of all, it's saying if you're a youth, or as was it Joe Pesci would say, if you're a ute, right? If you're a ute and the sound moves you, then it's fitting for our highly esteemed institution. Okay, the youth culture thing. Okay, so there are plenty of geezer bands out there who didn't necessarily move youth culture. In fact, a lot of them were trailblazers. Youth culture tends to be motivated by bubblegum music, stuff that's very disposable. So, in the future, I'm sure we're going to get the Britney Spears nomination, right? And all the other youth culture things that have been around for a couple of decades that aren't technically eligible yet to be in this hallowed institution. They go on. Dolly Parton's music impacted a generation of young fans and influenced countless artists that followed. Don't you have to go back to like the 1960s where Dolly Parton was impacting young fans? I mean, did she influence young fans in the 1970s? I don't think so. I think Dolly's music was always for mature adults, even when she was a lot younger. So again, these statements, they don't make a lot of sense in any context at all. All right. I mean, I was kind of buying it when they said, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has had deep roots in rhythm and blues and country music, or rock and roll in general. But they lost me once they started talking about youth culture. Why does it just have to be impactful for youth culture? Isn't rock and roll kind of a universal thing? And that kind of reeks of ageism on top of it. So what's youth culture? What's the red line when you hit 30, when you hit 40? I mean, if you start liking something when you're older, when you know better, isn't that a better barometer if it's good or not? I mean, my musical instincts have changed over the years. I liked some good stuff when I was younger, but I also liked some crap when I was younger too. And Some of the stuff I liked is like a guilty pleasure. I don't know if it belongs in the Hall of Fame. Just like I don't think Dolly Parton belongs in the Hall of Fame. Anyway, they continue. Dolly's nomination, along with the other 16 artists for the class of 2022, was sent out earlier this month to our 1,200 general ballot voters, the majority of whom are artists themselves, for consideration for induction at our ceremony. We are in awe of Dolly's brilliant talent and pioneering spirit and are proud to have nominated her for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay, so that last sentence is what this is all about. They nominated her so they don't want to look stupid at this point. We're proud of what we did, even though it doesn't make sense, even though she knows it doesn't make sense. And she called us out on it. She was courageous. Not only was she humble, she was courageous. Look, this institution needs reform. And she suggested, right, that they have categories within the Hall of Fame so she could still be inducted, but don't just make this overarching general category like Dolly Parton, Rage Against the Machine. Nope, sorry, doesn't work. I mean, that's why I said it's kind of like the non-binary music Hall of Fame. It's fluid. It doesn't have any direction. You can cite country and R&B influences at the beginning. People who instinctively know what rock and roll is, they understand that Dolly Parton really isn't rock and roll. I mean, there may be some elements within her music, right, that are rock and roll. And I would say the same thing is true of Eminem, A Tribe Called Quest. And some people might even say Dionne Warwick isn't quite where she should be, although she's worked with some people that have leaned in that direction. Although, you know, her talent is quite large, like Dolly's, and the overarching thing is talent, I guess. But this is called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have a problem. The problem is they need to define who they are or put a name on it that makes sense. Is it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Is it the Pop Music Hall of Fame? Is it the multi-genre Hall of Fame? You could have an alphabet soup of letters at the beginning that represent what it is. You know, you could have, you know, each letter representing a form of music that is under the umbrella of rock, because that's kind of what they're saying. And I sort of understand that, but Dolly doesn't feel comfortable being put into this institution, but yet they're insisting, based on their super wise choice, they don't want to look stupid. That's what this is about. Even though these are really nice, friendly statements, and, you know, they don't understand why people don't see why Dolly shouldn't be in there. And, you know, again, they try to define themselves. I think it's even harder for music like Eminem and A Tribe Called Quest than it is Dolly Parton. Because again, Dolly Parton has probably worked with some really good guitar players over the years, right? And Dolly Parton's probably worked with some talented keyboard players and people who play instruments and don't write their music on a computer, okay, and then expect that to be the same as like Chuck Berry or Sly and the Family Stone. It's not the same thing, people. And everybody knows that. This is not like rocket science here. I think overall, she did an awesome thing. And I'd like to see other people do it when they're nominated. I mean, are they going to make a ton more money for being in the Hall of Fame? Sometimes you can, you know, do a tour right after you're inducted into the Hall of Fame. And then, you know, you might have higher visibility. I mean, the Doobie Brothers wanted to do that, but again, they were canceled like 2 years in a row, I think, because of the thing, right? I think they wanted to kind of piggyback off of that and bring everybody together, which they did, but they lost the mojo. They lost the momentum. Everybody forgot they were put into the Hall of Fame. By the way, that's a rock and roll band. They should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? Dolly Parton is not a rock and roll artist. That's the bottom line. And the Hall of Fame, has doubled down and said, nope, you can't take yourself out of the running. We're going to keep you in. We're going to keep you in. We've got your stuff out there already. We have 1,200 people voting. I mean, if Nancy Wilson is going to vote, which I think she is, because she said she's voting on something yesterday, which I'm assuming is who belongs in the Hall of Fame this year, I'm hoping that she doesn't vote for Dolly. It would be nice for these artists to honor what Dolly Parton wanted and not listen to these people who are trying to turn their institution into something that it never should have been. Now, you could say, well, this institution has been flawed for the last 30 years, and I would agree with you. But that doesn't mean you don't try to reform it and that you don't try to call it out when it does stupid things. And you should also applaud someone who does the right thing. And they're not doing that. They're saying, yeah, it was really nice of her to take herself out. It's humble. It's great. But we're not going to honor her request. We're just going to keep the voting alive. So in any event, if you're a Judas Priest fan, right? And you want Judas Priest to go in, you're going to get votes for Dolly Parton that are going to take away from Judas Priest votes, or whoever else that you think is deserving this time around. If you want to see, I don't know, who's up again, is it Duran Duran? They're up for it. There are a few bands that are kind of borderline on my list. There are some women that should be in that certainly are in the category. I mean, Pat Benatar, right? Definitely should be in this time. Carly Simon should be in. Now, some would argue that Carly is adult contemporary and that's not really rock. I don't know. She has Mick Jagger singing on her biggest song. I'm thinking, yeah, Carly should be in. And, Carly is super talented. She's won all kinds of awards, as has Dolly Parton. Okay. And they're both really great songwriters, but stylistically, it's, apples and oranges, people. That's what this pretty much is all about. So that's my video on the topic. The Hall of Fame says, nope, sorry, Dolly. You can't quit. We won't let you quit. And if we want you to go in there, and that's going to be awkward if she wins, right? She has to give this acceptance speech. Actually, that might be interesting, because if she does win and she has to go up there and give a speech, what would be interesting is for her to tell everybody, I don't belong here. Still, hold the award up and say, I don't deserve this. And these guys really need to start nominating people that deserve to be in based on what this is, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.